Hi, Kevin Wright, back with another property finance video, and this week's subject is auctions. More specifically, how you're going to fund a property where you buy it at auction. Interested in that? Keep watching. Hey, have you subscribed? If not, click that button there. Oh, and that belly thing, so you get notification. Thanks. Auctions, well, they're a perennially popular way of buying property. And they work well for both sellers and buyers insofar as it's a quick process. With most auction houses, it's done in 28 days. That's great for a seller because they're not going to be messed around by buyers, and that often happens when you go through an agent. If you're selling a property, the buyer will mess you around for weeks and weeks and weeks and then change their mind and drop out. We were helping one of my students out with a deal, and they picked up a deal where the buyer had been messing the seller about for 6 months and then changed their mind. So my student Richard was able to jump in there and say, yes, we'll buy that, and hey, we're not going to mess you around. But you don't get that messing around with auctions, because on a typical traditional auction, you get 28 days to buy it and you exchange contracts on auction day. So it's much more cut and dry for sellers. It's attractive to sellers. Now it can be attractive to buyers too, because the seller can't pull out either. The seller's contracted to complete the purchase, and as long as you've got your finance sorted and you know how you're going to complete, because you've only got 28 days with most auction houses to do so, it works for buyers too. So if you're going to buy at auction, how are you going to finance it? Well, 3 options really: cash, bridging, mortgage. And let's look at all 3. Cash. Now, if you've got a big chunk of cash, then you're primed and ready to go to buy at auction. Because if you're restricted time-wise, 28 days is enough if you've got the cash to go and buy it. If you haven't got cash, is there another cash option? Yeah, if it's not your cash, someone else's cash. Maybe you know someone that is happy to put their cash up to buy your auction deal. Now, with most properties, that's going to be a fairly chunky amount of cash, but maybe you know someone that will do that. Whether they lend it to you or whether you do, let's say, a joint venture, and you go into business together, they put the cash in, you put the work in. That's a common strategy. So cash is certainly used extensively to buy properties at auction. But if it's not cash, bridging is also very popular. Bridging finance is one of the main ways that property purchases are financed. And if you haven't got cash, then bridging is usually the next best alternative. Why is that, you may ask? Because of speed. Bridging lenders are geared up to release the money to buy a property at auction, and their time frame is 14 to 28 days. Now, with most auction houses, you do get 28 days. So over the years, bridgers have refined their processing times so they can turn that money around in a fast enough time. Now, if you're thinking, whoa, I've heard that bridging is expensive. Well, compared to mortgage rates, it's certainly higher, probably about 3 times the cost on average. But if you're restricted to 28 days to complete the purchase of a property, then maybe bridging is a necessary cost. And as long as you've calculated and factored in the cost of bridging in the overall project cost, and you can still make money doing that, it's a perfectly viable way to do it. So we've looked at cash, we looked at bridging. Now the third way is mortgage. 2 issues here that could throw a spanner in the works or a spoke in the wheel. Time and the condition of the property. Let's look at the condition of the property first. The premise of mortgages, buy-to-let mortgages, and HMOs and serviced accommodation and the like, is it's ready to rent. In other words, it's in a condition good enough to put a tenant straight in there, with a little bit of tolerance for maybe a little bit of minor refurb work. Now, if you're like me, you've noticed that an awful lot of properties that come up for sale at auction are nothing like that. They're nowhere near ready to rent, and they're pretty dilapidated, which means you probably wouldn't get a mortgage on them. So the first big problem with trying to use a mortgage to buy an auction property is, will the lender's valuer say it's not mortgageable? Now, if you've already exchanged contracts, you're going to be committed to complete the purchase. Not only that, you're going to be committed to complete the purchase in the auctioneer's timeframe, which, as we've said, is usually 28 days. So completing a mortgage application, getting a survey booked, getting the valuation report back from the survey, and then finding out it's not mortgageable is going to leave you with very little time to arrange alternative finance. So there's a real risk there that just on the condition of the property, you could lose your deposit. And hey, no one wants to do that, do they? So if condition of the property is a potential issue, so is processing time. Now, mortgage lenders have never been particularly quick at turning around mortgages, and post-COVID, they're even slower than they were before, simply because of staffing issues and the like. Now, that's not to say it's impossible to get a mortgage turned around in enough time that the completion can go ahead, but it's a big ask for most lenders. So even if you're fairly sure that the property is in reasonable condition, and of course that's not why you go to auction most of the time, then crossing your fingers that the processing goes fast enough to allow the mortgage offer to come out to still give your solicitor enough time to do all the conveyancing work to complete in the 28-day time frame is going to be, at the very least, challenging. Now the question is, how much stress can you handle with your 10% deposit at stake? And you may feel, as many do, that the risk of losing your 10% deposit if the mortgage lender doesn't perform is too great. You'd have to be pretty brave as a broker to give any sort of guarantee that you could get a mortgage through in as little as 28 days. And your choice of mortgage lenders confidently able to work within that restricted timescale is going to be pretty limited. So summing up how to finance an auction purchase safely: your cash, no problem at all. Someone else's cash, no problem at all. Bridging finance, pretty much with every bridger, no problem at all. Mortgages, very questionable, very stressful. Be very careful if you're thinking of financing an auction purchase with a mortgage. If it's a cash purchase, hey, you don't need brokers for that, so good luck with your cash purchase. If it's bridging, well, we've brokered hundreds of bridging loans in the past 10 years. Be happy to do that for you. If it's a mortgage, we're going to give you a very strong guidance about the risks you'll be taking trying to do an auction purchase using a mortgage. So there we are. That's this week's video, all about auction financing. Hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, leave some comments below. I'll be glad to answer them. I'll be back next week with another property finance video. Hey, hang around. There's something else I want you to see. Hey, have you subscribed? If not, click that button there. Oh, and that belly thing, so you get notification. Thanks. Oh, have you commented? I love you to comment on my videos. I'll always answer them. Leave a comment. Thanks. If you enjoyed watching this video, did you know every Monday morning at 8:30 I do a live Facebook Q&A. So if you want to start the week with checking out some answers to your property finance questions, click the link here.